How long does it take to get Hannah home?
Normally, how long does it take for the muscles and other cells to begin burning sugar instead of oxygen?
How long does it take to rob a bank?
How long does it take? How long does it take?
どれくらいかかりますかという意味ですね。ピザを注文した時やクリーニングを依頼した場合など、英語圏で生活していると1日何回も使う表現ですので、さらっと言えるように100回くらい練習しましょう。それではネイティブがどういう風に発音するか聞いてみましょう。
How long does it take to get Hannah home?
Normally, how long does it take for the muscles and other cells to begin burning sugar instead of oxygen?
How long does it take to rob a bank?
I said, how long does it take to get a divorce?
How long does it take to power up the lamp?
How long does it take to say leave the gate open and let in the rabbits?
How long does it take for the hair to grow back?
How long does it take to get your act together?
How long does it take you, ma'am, to get to know someone?
How long does it take me to get from Yazoo to Europe?
How long does it take a man to ride to Pecos, Harry?
How long does it take to save someone's soul?
How long does it take?
How long does it take you to paint a picture?
Listen, how long does it take to get all that money together anyway?
How long does it take?
How long does it take until we know for sure?
How long does it take?
How long does it take to do alterations?
And how long does it take once we've placed an order? Oh.
How long does it take at Racer Motors?
How long does it take to find a budget?
How long does it take?
How long does it take you to paint a ladybug?
So, how long does it take?
How long does it take to work?
How long does it take you to paint a picture?
Yeah, how long does it take to get to Tucson?
How long does it take to complete a PhD?
How long does it take to grow a new set of balls?
Let me ask you, how long does it take, to fill the log?
How long does it take to work?
How long does it take, for someone to be interested?
How long does it take for the infection to take hold?
How long does it take for a letter to get from Stockholm to Edinburgh?
How long does it take to open a can of beans?
How long does it take to cook?
How long does it take to get a room in the shebang?
How long does it take to get a divorce?
How long does it take to get a drawer?
How long does it take a man to land?
How long does it take an ordinary rabbit to reach full growth?
How long does it take to milk a cow?
How long does it take to become a friend of Johnny Morrison's?
How long does it take for it to really sink in that I've got it?
Okay, well, how long does it take to walk to the parking structure?
How long does it take to get into my own house?
How long does it take to work?
How long does it take to sell this fucking house?
Hey, how long does it take for IOPS to turn around prints usually?
You thought, how long does it take to drive in from Southampton anyway?
How long does it take?
How long does it take a man to get himself?
How long does it take to get there?
How long does it take to kill one limping teenager?
How long does it take to wear off?
If Joe can paint a house in 3 hours, and Sam can paint the same house in 5 hours, how long does it take for them to do it together?
Oh, for God's sake, how long does it take you people to do your job?
How long does it take?
How long does it take to get to Albany? Well, how long does it take to get there?
How long does it take you to go through a bank?
How long does it take to get your hair like that?
How long does it take to work?
How long does it take to get from Sudan to Sinai by boat?
How long does it take to fly to the island?
Okay, how long does it take you to get to work?
How long does it take you to learn, man, that we're free thinkers?
Well, how long does it take, Woody Joe? How long does it take you to starve?
How long does it take to get from number 6 to number 1?
How long does it take?
How long does it take for it to work?
How long does it take you?
How long does it take the train to arrive at its destination if Boston is hypothetically 400 miles away?
How long does it take to disguise one of those nags anyway?
The facts are that when love is returned with hate, loyalty is returned with infidelity. How long does it take before something has to be done about it?
How long does it take to drown?
How long does it take?
How long does it take?
How long does it take to cross the water?
How long does it take to scrape feet?
How long does it take you to get to the airport?
How long does it take?
How long does it take to die from cirrhosis of the liver? How long does it take for this stuff to work anyway?
How long does it take to get to Valencia from here?
Well, how long does it take you to write a feature story?
How long does it take to make a candle?
How long does it take to build all this? How long does it take to get a glass of water?
But how long does it take?
How long does it take you to get undressed?
How long does it take for this drug to start working?
How long does it take?
How long does it take for the child to reach the buyers?
How long does it take to draw up court-martial papers?
How long does it take to make this many pictures?
How long does it take to feed this pack of dogs?
I mean, how long does it take to walk from McDonald's?
How long does it take to shut down your atomic plant?
How long does it take?
How long does it take to get to the airport?
Hey, Charlie, how long does it take you to change your pants?
How long does it take for you to get here from Aurora?
How long does it take to get up there?
How long does it take to get there?
How long does it take to save for the boot?
How long does it take to build a city?
How long does it take?
Well, you got an asshole exploiting a kid, and how long does it take us to bring him to trial?
I was just wondering, how long does it take you to become a police officer?
I swear, how long does it take that boy to put a tux on?
How long does it take to get to the Enchanted Forest from here?
How long does it take you to pick up fucking ice cream?
How long does it take to build one gingerbread house?
How long does it take to get to the Everglades?
Listen, slow wit, how long does it take you to get a pail of water?
How long does it take a man like you to forgive himself?
How long does it take?
Yeah, how long does it take to get there?
How long does it take to fly to New York?
How long does it take these brain cells to start revitalizing?
How long does it take to reconnect a few lousy cable wires?
How long does it take to become a local?
You know, how long does it take to get to the coast?
How long does it take to throw one?
So, how long does it take to install one of those things?
How long does it take to put makeup on two faces in the morning?
But, I wanted to ask you, how long does it take you to write one of your...
So, how long does it take you to get back to Bensonhurst?
How long does it take to get to the concert?
Come on, how long does it take to fix a flat?
How long does it take to bring in your crop?
How long does it take to get lost? How long does it take?
How long does it take to drown?
Say, how long does it take to open a safe?
How long does it take to save someone's soul?
Yeah, how long does it take to get all that, huh?
How long does it take?
在美国要多长时间才能挣上100万美金？
How long does it take the creature to prepare for division?
How long does it take to hand someone a skateboard?
How long does it take for a man to get dressed?
How long does it take to prep the pod?
How long does it take?
How long does it take you to buy a suit?
How long does it take to scribble an answer to a kid?
Okay, how long does it take for an eyebrow to grow back?
How long does it take you to tell me about Vinny?
How long does it take?
How long does it take you to...
Oh, hello, Mother!
How long does it take you to cool down?
How long does it take to drive a block, you idiot?
How long does it take to find foster care for these children?
How long does it take to decorate a tree?
How long does it take you to recharge?
How long does it take to give a statement?
How long does it take?
If the baby's heart rate doesn't go up, how long does it take to...
Once I get her in the operating room, I can have the baby out in 60 seconds if I have to.
Well, how long does it take to put money into a man's account?
How long does it take to trace a call these days?
How long does it take to go to the bathroom?
How long does it take to pick up a wheel?
How long does it take to set everything up?
How long does it take to plan one day?
How long does it take to get to Newark Airport from here?
And how long does it take to grow a Christmas tree?
How long does it take to get a passport, you know?
So, how long does it take an intelligent man like yourself to go to school to be an inspector?
How long does it take to boil mud?
How long does it take your ass to get back from the corner store?
I mean, how long does it take to get beers from the basement?
How long does it take to throw out the trash?
How long does it take trees to grow?
How long does it take?
How long does it take for a larva to turn into a caterpillar?
Only how long does it take to get married?
So how long does it take to get a response on one of those computer dating things?
When I go get Greek food, how long does it take me?
How long does it take to score a goal? How long does it take you to make one?
How long does it take?
Hey, Frankie.
いかがでしたか？気に入ったフレーズを見つけたら何度も声に出して練習し、自分で使えるフレーズを増やしていきましょう。